Welcome to the Marketing Mastermind, a podcast designed to elevate your entrepreneurial mindset and help you take your business to the next level through digital marketing. Join your host, agency owner Hilary Russell, as she interviews experts from around the world, dives into business success secrets, and gives tactical mindset training to help you elevate all areas of your life and business. Ready? Let's dive into another Marketing Mastermind episode.
All right, welcome to another episode, guys. I am Hilary Russell, your host, and I'm excited for this week's episode because honestly, it's a little bit out of the ordinary from what we typically talk about on the Marketing Mastermind. It's something more along the lines of, an industry, an individual who has built a successful business in an industry that is more, unorthodox than the digital world that we're living in today. And so I'm really excited to introduce our guest to you all. Our guest today is Trevor Stevens. Thanks for joining me, Trevor.
Thanks for having me. This is great.
Absolutely. Yeah. So before we dive in, I'm going to give you the floor for about, 30 seconds, a couple minutes, whatever, however long you want to take. But tell our audience a little bit about your business and your area of expertise.
Sure. So it's funny. I don't know if I can say that I have an area of expertise other than but thinking about something that I want to do, getting obsessed with it for about 6 months, executing it for however long, and then moving on to the next thing. So just a background on me, I did a bunch of hands-on trade stuff in high school. That's what I was thinking coming out of high school to do. I went to Mexico to serve a mission for 2 years, decided that I wanted to possibly pursue dentistry because of the life it would give my family and hours, right?
Mm-hmm.
Hit chemistry, did not like that. Switched to manufacturing engineering, which is building stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
And got into that. I loved the building aspect. I didn't love the mass production, but as I got into the industry, that's pretty much the only 90%. You have to effectively build your own business if you want to do something. Like some of the cool things I saw was somebody that created a small business where they built snowboards, and so they love snowboarding. And so they wanted to build the best snowboards. Right. So I was like, oh man, that'd be really cool. But it's so difficult to get those jobs. So I just went into the normal industry. I realized that after 4 years, I realized the company that I worked with was pretty much a meat grinder.
Mm.
And the only ones that kind of stayed there were the ones that just wanted a paycheck and could do the minimum, or ones that were kind of tapped to follow some succession plan. So that just wasn't for me. I talked to a guy who was doing home building. I'm like, man, I love homes. So I decided to jump into that and spent a couple of years learning how to build homes and some of the pros and cons of that. I still kind of felt that corporate, meat grinder feel. I couldn't really work with my clients the way I wanted to. I couldn't really help them see the values that they were getting because it didn't fit a marketing strategy or brand.
Yeah.
So I just kind of got frustrated, and we don't have kids. And my wife was like, well, if you want to try something, you try it now.
Yeah.
So the last year and a half, I've been trying to figure out what I want to do, and trying to find that. And so I built my house where I'm at now, and then my in-laws next door, and thought, well, general contracting will be awesome.
Mm-hmm.
But as the market's kind of shifted a little bit, I've decided, well, maybe I should do something a little bit more in my wheelhouse first, get that established, and then, branch out. And so that's where I've got my CNC machine. I do all sorts of CNC stuff. This is actually something I'm currently working on. accent tiles that are kind of DIY. You just put the 3M stuff on there and you can change them and change them and change them. So,
well, that's cool. Yeah, for those that are watching on YouTube, you can see behind Trevor, he's got an awesome background. And those on the podcast listening, jump on YouTube really quick and look at it because it's cool. Yeah, that is super awesome. I was going to ask if you designed that. That's really cool.
yeah. Yep.
Cool. So your business is called Forge, Build, and Design. And I think where I want to start with this, Trevor, is I know for myself, I always had in the back of my mind this little spark, right? That I knew that I wanted to someday do something. Someday I wanted to start a business or, something like that, but I just didn't know what it was. And it took me, well over 10 years to figure out how and what I was going to do. So what was that process like for you? Because I know you mentioned a little bit that, the company that you're with for a bit there, you just didn't feel, or maybe you felt, a little bit restricted on what you were able to do and what you were able to deliver for clients. But was that really it? Or were there more pieces of the process as you were deciding to start your own thing?
Yeah, I think it was just, I think the biggest part that even allowed me to get to this point was the conversation I had with my wife, because my thought was always, I've got to make enough money to where she could stay home if she wants to, right?
Yeah.
That's kind of my background, my philosophy. And so when I got married to her, we kind of started having conversations. She's like, I don't really know if I want to stay home full time. I don't know if that's going to work for me. And she's like, is that okay? And I said, yeah. My idea is not necessarily to like trap you, but to at least to be able to make that possible for you and our kids rather. But if you want to do something else, like she spent a ton of time, she's a doctor, she's got a lot of education, and she's just awesome at her job. So I'm like, yeah, if you want to do that, then fantastic. And it changed my mentality, and it's been really difficult to try to change that mentality because I didn't really even think about the possibility of even trying to find a job that I really, really liked without the money portion of that puzzle.
Yeah.
You just have to make a decent amount of money, right, to be able to do what you want to do. But it's not like I have to climb a ladder that I hate to make more money to give my family more opportunity because of what she's doing. So it really freed me up to say, well, what the crap do I want to do?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's different motives behind it too. I think, that's a really good point. I think a lot of us fall into a career path that's solely based on, well, this is where I'm making money, or this is where I get benefits, or this is what is supporting my family right now. So it's too risky for something else.
Yeah,
that's a good point.
Yeah. And so, it's just kind of been a process where I tried to do some other stuff just to see. I tried to get smaller and smaller companies just because I didn't really like the big company feel. You're just kind of a number. There's no humanity in it really. So because we had the opportunity to try to test out the waters for doing my own business, that's the direction I went. And so the first year or at least like the first 6 to 8 months, I was torn between trying to do general contracting and the CNC woodwork stuff. And I just found out that I wasn't really, I would take one step this way and then step back and then try to take a step this way and step back. And every step you took, you had to take more steps back. And so it just took a lot of energy. And so the real goal for me was to not be like a high volume general contractor, but be like very custom. I want like my prime customer would be somebody that just has this, great idea that they want to do, and we work together to execute it, and I can help them design and stuff like that. I got a lot of that with my in-laws. They built a house right next to us. I know some people would be like, but they're really cool. So Anyway, I loved helping them just be like, hey, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? We could change this with your money situation. We could do
Right.
this. You know, it was just really fun to be able to help them walk through some of the ideas and thoughts that they might have not, have thought of. And so to try to save them money up front by asking those questions was really fun.
That's cool. Yeah, that's really cool. So one thing that you mentioned with that, with really deciding which direction you wanted to go, I think is something that a lot of us face when we're starting a business is, how do I balance my time? And it's
Yep.
almost this science and this art as well, right? Between when you're starting a business, a lot of times we're still kind of unsure of what this is going to evolve into.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's almost like, okay, I got to give myself grace to let this evolve, but at the same time, be intentional about what I'm creating. So what is your advice for maybe entrepreneurs who are starting that process or starting that part of their journey? What advice would you give to them, or even to yourself, if you could go back, to when you were first starting out?
I think something that would have helped me take advantage more of the time that I had at the beginning would be to really kind of do more activities that would help me to find exactly what I'm wanting to do. And because of coming back to what I said before, because I get so almost bored with stuff or whatever, I get worried that I'm like, I don't know if other people are like this, but if it's like, I'm going to be doing this for the rest of my life,
Yeah.
that is like, it's almost daunting. And so instead of just being like, I've got a buddy that's kind of a mentor, and he's just like, he's got a great vision. And what he does is he kind of builds it, and then he gets the right people and he puts them there, and then he goes to the next one, and then he builds it. And then, so he just keeps doing this thing where he gets the right people. And so I'm kind of following that thought process of like, okay, well, I don't want to be a CNC operator, machinery type person forever, but I can build that. I can get it going, and then I can get a good person to come in and, take that spot and really run with it. Like somebody that really wants to love to dig their teeth into that, put them there, and then let them kind of run with it while I start other things.
Mm-hmm.
But you have to start with something. And I feel like I jumped. So this is going to be the nerdy part. Did you ever play like Diablo or Zelda or anything like that?
I had Zelda. I had a little DS, like a little
Okay.
DS. Yeah.
So everybody knows that plays Zelda or Diablo or anything like that. You start off, in the town that everybody's nice, and you're like grabbing chickens and breaking pots. And I mean, you're doing a bunch of really stupid, whatever, not grandiose stuff to get your basic tools, right? Your wood sword, your wood shield, whatever. And then you take a step out into more of the world, and things are harder or whatever. But the point is if you were to take yourself and drop yourself into level 5, the monsters are going to just kill you. You're done. So one of the things that I look back, I'm like, okay, I need to be humble. I need to be like, you gotta start on ground one, and you might have to do some of the stuff that you think is stupid or boring or whatever, but you got to get your wood shield. If you don't have your wood shield, it's not going to matter. You can't get your metal shield. You can't get your whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So kind of grasping that idea of like, as you're starting the business, you're starting in the town. You don't have all these things. Don't run out and try to kill Ganondorf or whatever. Like start on the small stuff, get something going, which is kind of what I've got here. Like I'm trying to do this, trying to see if it'll catch. If it catches, great. Then I can use that resource to build something else, and then build something else. And that's kind of my thought.
Yeah. Yeah, that's cool. I like that. Yeah, there was I think just last week I was having a conversation with someone where they use the analogy of, the chain links, right? Like you have to go link by link. You can't just jump like right ahead. I mean, there are some things that can give us maybe, you know, a little bit of an edge, or we can cut corners a little bit, right? Like working with mentors or coaches or different things. But at the end of the day, you know, you got to put in the work. You've got to do the boring stuff. And I would say that's what filters out those that are successful versus those that aren't, are those of us that are willing to do the boring stuff, the hard stuff, the things that are monotonous, you know, building that foundation so that it is something that can be sustainable too. Yeah, that's smart. Okay. So along those lines, what would you say are some of the core pieces to lay the foundation of, to build a solid foundation? Because now, I mean, where you're at now, Trevor, you've done a couple of different, you know, different types of maybe business models, right? With working with the company beforehand, doing general contracting, the woodworking. So I think across the board, you know, businesses need specific things to have a strong foundation. What, in your opinion, what are some of those that you work on focusing on in order to get it to a place that it's solid?
So I feel like I'm actually more in that process of creating that foundation rather than being on the other side and feeling like, oh, look at that foundation I built.
Yeah.
I feel like, you know, when I went into manufacturing engineering, I didn't like the mass production stuff. And so this type of product behind me, for people that are not, or that are listening, that are not watching, I always listen while I work. And so I keep forgetting about that, but I just keep pointing back to the little tiles that I'm building. And they could be considered mass manufacturing. And that like kind of makes me not want to do them. But the one thing that makes me feel okay about it is that, you know, I could do it in batches and then switch out designs, similar to what people do like on YouTube channels where they've got shirt designs where it's only for a certain time and then they switch to something else. And then if for some reason it becomes really popular, I could outsource it to another company where their business is mass manufacturing. And then I can just kind of say, hey, I've done the testing and stuff. There's a certain amount of interest. There's a certain amount of stuff. This is the amounts that I've been making. You know, do you want to take it over and just give me a royalty or whatever that looks like? And so it kind of allows me to become the testing ground to see if things are viable, if they're fun. And for me, that's the fun part, you know, is being like, oh, well, what about this design? What about that design? Would this work? I don't know if that would work. How do we make this better? How do we make this more valuable? So,
right. Yeah.
So right now that's what I'm working on, is trying to get some bread and butter, things that can kind of give me a little bit more steady resources to where I can take care of my responsibilities with my family, and then be able to take that money and invest it back into the business for more things.
Right. So. Yeah. I love that. I love that you said it that way too, because one thing that, so with Entre Institute, one thing that I talk about a lot with the new entrepreneurs that we work with is that, especially in the beginning stages, and I think honestly throughout your business, there's new levels of this at every new level of success, but you really have to give yourself the ability to be a scientist, right? And what I mean by that is exactly what you're describing, Trevor, is like, give yourself the space to just experiment and see what's going to work, what's not, right? I mean, we hear stories all the time about, I don't know the exact numbers. I'm so bad with like exact numbers, but like KFC, right? Like how many times did he have to try before he got it right? And like the guy that invented either Dyson or Hoover, I think it was Dyson, it was like 1,200 times before he actually got the vacuum right. And it blew up into this, multi-billion-dollar company. And so I think that a lot of times, especially as entrepreneurs, we're really hard on ourselves when something doesn't work. But I think honestly, like that's the magic of it, is when something doesn't work and we're like, oh, cool. How can I pivot then to do something a little bit better, or something that takes off, or so maybe something that I'll like more than this, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool.
Well, and along that lines, I feel like I have the tendency to be like all or nothing. So it like if like my mind immediately wants to go like worst case scenario or like best case scenario and nothing in between. And so it's like either I am super successful or I am the trash of the trash. And I failed and it sucks. And I get to go back to my whatever and then put my head down for the next 40 years and whatever. Instead of being like, oh no, it didn't work out with this one, but what about, the next one and the next one. And so I think along those lines, sometimes we think we need to invent a new wheel, and what we don't recognize is that if we can take something that's, that works and add 5-10% more value, sometimes that's all you need. It's really those incremental steps that are great. And if you're also like me, one of the trip ups is because of that engineering mind or background, I'm like, well, I have to research it and plan it to the nth degree. And really the best way to go about things is to get to about 60 to 70%, maybe 70 to 80 if you can pull it off, and that you're like confident in it, and then execute. Because when you take your product or your design or whatever, and you bring it into the real world smacks you in the face. And the time you would have put into that extra 20%, extra 30%, a lot of those fixes you would have found probably wouldn't have been really needed or even helpful, because the real world tells you, oh, wait, you didn't think about this. You didn't think about that. You didn't think about this. And so, yeah.
Yeah. Oh man, that is so spot on. And this is what I absolutely love about our conversation and our, this interview in this episode, Trevor, is, I mean, to put it bluntly, like we are complete opposites in terms of business, right? Like your business model is working with your hands and building things and, actual skilled trade work, right? And I am not that, right? That's not my area of talent. Mine's on the digital side and digital marketing. But the cool thing about this is, and guys, I hope that you're writing that down when he was talking about that, because that is so spot on and exactly right for every single business model. I mean, I've, been consulting on a marketing aspect for years and years and years, and then starting my own business and helping others with their businesses. And that's true across the board, right? I think that we get so hung up on wanting to make it perfect that it's ultimately what holds us back from ever getting started or getting to that level of success in the first place. And I love that you said, it only needs to be like 60, 70, maybe 80% there to go and launch and jump in, because the marketplace, your audience, the clients that you're working with, the clients that don't want to work with you, the feedback that you get, the world smacking you in the face, like that's going to be what ultimately helps you evolve and shift and pivot to create something that is great. So
yeah, exactly. So similar to like the general contracting, I had worked for 2 years. I've got the engineering background. I've got, 2 really beautiful homes in my corner, and just trying to get people to come and, see my work was like pulling teeth, because I didn't have 5 years or whatever. And
yeah,
so I guess I kind of came out of it thinking, man, I've got a great portfolio. I've got hard products that people can come see, and they're going to be confident in me, and this is going to be great. And again, that real world kind of smacks you upside the head. And so it's like, okay, maybe that's going to be a little bit more difficult. And so looking at the market, I was just like, well, it seems like there's more people that are more established in that area, and maybe they've got a little bit more networking or tools or resources that I don't have. So if the market is shifting, it's going to be really difficult for me starting up to get people to trust when they're going to be wanting to trust those who are kind of like the go-to guys, the golden children of the community where everybody wants to get them. And now that things are going slower, they have more opportunities to get, that particular person. I'm not selling myself short that I couldn't be one of those golden children. I just have to recognize that I'm not in that position. So I pivoted to try to leverage my strengths to be a value add to those people. So be able to bring them products that they might not be able to get very easily that would add on to their home. So I'm still in that same industry, the same genre, still making those network connections, but trying to leverage some of my strengths to help them rather than be a competition in a difficult time.
Yeah. Yeah, that's brilliant. That really is. And we're going to bring this up because one thing that you mentioned, I was before we started recording, but you said something to the effect of not really being too on board with marketing and traditional marketing strategies, right?
Yeah.
But there's two pieces here that you just mentioned that I really want to dive deeper into. The first one being, kind of aware, if you will, right? Aware enough that you are like, okay, you know what? Here's where I'm at. Let's be real about it. Like realistically, this is where I'm at. The competition has had years and years of building a clientele. Maybe they've built, different levels of trust with their audience. So instead of letting that be something that holds you back, in true entrepreneur fashion, he said, where there's a will, there's a way. And, found a way to still leverage your talents and your skills to help them, right? To help them in the businesses that they're growing. And the cool part about that is, and I mean, going back to your Zelda analogy, that was perfect, but it's really just, getting those different shields, getting those different, resources and building up so that when you get to the next level, you're prepped. You can say, yeah, here's everything that I've done. Here's all the clients I've worked with, whether it's by association or directly through through your company. So that's super cool. The second thing that I was going to say is, and it's kind of funny because you said, there's kind of the golden children in the industry. And I think especially when it comes, so I'll say just kind of for context here, I grew up in a family where my stepdad owned a demolition company, and I grew up helping with that. Like some of my first jobs were helping in the office, doing their biddings, putting the bid packets together and things like that. Right.
Yeah.
So I have a little bit of understanding around that side of things when it comes to, all right, like there's a boys club there. There's, it's the golden, like you said, the golden children. Right. And I think that makes a lot of sense. But one thing you said with that though, is, they've had all of these years of building up whatever it is in their companies, their clientele, their trust. But for you, looking at it from the perspective of, okay, things are shifting. Our world is shifting. I mean, even in the last couple of years, we saw through the pandemic, we saw so much shift in the way that people even purchase things or made decisions about what they were going to purchase or who they were going to work with.
Yep.
So maybe speak to that a little bit, because I mean, just on our conversation here, you have some creative approaches. So speak to that a bit on, how you've really leveraged maybe the way that things have changed, or maybe even just, additional unique approaches to getting your foot in the door, for lack of better words, if you will.
Yeah. Yeah. So to comment on your first question or point,
Yeah.
I actually do not like marketing and advertising for the most part. And especially, I think, when I was younger, and not even that much younger, but I mean, like, even just starting out my business, I just see all of the stuff that we get bombarded with every day, all these, in my estimation, like, very worthless, there's no value. It's like they don't even try. It's like, I don't know. I'm like, why would you spend your time on that? Why wouldn't you spend your time and energy on something more interesting and more valuable instead of just trying to scam or spam or whatever?
Right.
So I think, and, maybe you could, convert me or whatever, but I think that recently I've been trying to think about things as tools and not like hate them for what they are, but rather for how the people are using them. So one of the things that I come back to is like Second Amendment, gun control, whatever. Like, a gun is a tool. It can be used to save. It can be used to provide for your family. It can also be used for terrible things. Knives are the same way. All of the machinery that I use, could be used in terrible ways,
Yeah.
But they also can create magnificent things as well. And so I think I've softened a little bit to some of that, and maybe focused my hate a little bit on the people who are using the tools in ways that I don't really appreciate.
Sure. Yeah, I like that perspective.
But and not only do I dislike that, but I'm just not a good salesman. Like, half the time I'm like, you don't need this. You should be spending your money on something else. Like, you should be doing whatever. Like, I could not be a door-to-door salesman for Vivint or whatever. I was a technician for pest control, but I wasn't a salesman.
Okay.
And anyway, so I'm hard at like selling stuff, and people are like, but that's why you would be good. And I'm like, I don't know. It hasn't worked so far. I'm working on building that up, but I guess just finding ways to like point out the value of what you're trying to create, and being okay with doing that. I think that's probably one of my biggest hurdles recently. But when it comes to like talking about your second question or comment, with the background that I have, the education that I have in manufacturing engineering, a lot of that has to do with automation. It has to do with machines. And so a lot of people get like afraid of that, or worried about that. Especially, you could talk about the AI stuff that's going on right now. And
Right.
And then also, like you were saying, the supply chain problems.
Right.
One of the things that I've personally, especially while in the business aspect, is just recognizing that, people have more power than they think. And I think at some point we're going to have to choose who and what to support, because I think things are going to be so cheap and so easily accessible that we'll be able to buy whatever we want. But you have to think about what that does. And for me, looking down that path, it centralizes all the power. All of the money goes to very few people because they can use these tools to make things very cheap, and even replace people. But the problem with that is that if you're not paying people, then people don't have money, and then they can't buy your stuff.
Right.
So you really, like, logically, you kind of walk down this path, and it's like, either we get to the point where the government says we're just going to do universal basic income, which I'm not a fan of, or we're going to have to get to the point where it's like, I want to support people. So I'm willing to pay more to support people, to have interaction, to help them make their dreams come true, to give our community more resources. Because when people buy from me, I turn around and invest in machines that can do more things, or people that can do more things, right? So it's all of a sudden, let's say another pandemic comes, we have a lot more capability locally instead of shipping that off to somewhere else. And so I think as a people, we probably need to start thinking about that. You know, is cheapest the best, or are we shooting ourselves in the foot for short-term gains?
Right. Yeah, that's a really great thought. And I'm going to bring that back even to what we were, talking about beforehand with your perspective on marketing, because I think it really does go hand in hand. I mean, I'll just tell a little bit here for my agency. When I decided to start it, I'd spent about 4 or 5 years as a marketing consultant up to that point, and kind of had a same realization that you had, that you expressed when you were working for a company and just felt restricted, right? And couldn't serve your clients to the best of your ability. That's really, how I felt. And so when I decided to start my agency, it was under the intention of, providing companies the type of marketing strategy that aligns with their values, that aligns with their goals, not just pushing some sleazy, salesy ad in everyone's face, or, doing the same cookie cutter solutions that every other marketing agency is doing, right? All of us as individuals are unique. And so all of our businesses are very unique. We have different strengths and different talents. And I think, honestly, just on what you're expressing, that is your marketing strategy. And I think your strategy is to build as strong relationships as possible by providing the highest value, the best experience for your clients. And that's a marketing strategy, right? Because just like you were expressing, businesses out there can say, hey, we have the fastest service, or you can say, hey, we have the highest quality service, right? Or you can say, hey, we have the cheapest option, or we have the most long lasting option that you can purchase, right? Yeah. It's not going to be both, but it's dependent to the consumer of, where do you want to invest? Because you can invest and get it quick, but that's probably not going to mean that it's going to last long.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and not only that, but really thinking about what you are investing in outside of the product you're actually buying. Mm-hmm. Because you're not just investing in a product or something that you're going to use. You're investing in, excuse me, you're investing in the people, right? And so how are they going to use that? How are they going to use that to benefit the community you're in? Don't get me wrong. I'm not anti-technology by any means. I'm in favor of any technology that augments the capabilities of people to do more, right? But I think we don't give ourselves enough, or maybe we don't recognize the power we truly have. People talk about voting, and voting only happens every so often, but you vote with your dollar every single day. Mm-hmm. And you vote with your attention every single day. YouTube is absolutely ridiculous. Like, there are people out there that are making a ton of money just by having other people watch them. So you literally have power in your attention. You could spend 10, 15 minutes watching somebody's podcast or YouTube or whatever, and all of a sudden they can, if you get 10,000 people to do that, you don't need 1 billion people, but you get 10,000 people to do that, and all of a sudden you're making enough money to do what you want to do. And then you're unlocking this freedom. And so there's a lot more. I feel like people don't recognize the power that they have. You can support people not by just buying, but by liking, sharing. And that sounds terrible and makes me want to throw up. but liking, sharing, spending some time listening to their podcast. I mean,
Mhm.
I don't know if you're religious, but I'm religious, and there's a particular guy that talks about the second coming, and so it's very interesting to me. It's entertaining, and he goes through and does a bunch of research and whatnot, and he's pretty much stopped his other job and he does that full time. I mean, what a niche.
Mhm.
Never would we have thought that that's something you could do, but he's got like 14,000 followers. He makes enough money to do what he needs to do, and he's got a homestead in Kansas. I mean,
Yeah.
there's so much potential and possibility, especially if you're willing to really take a hard look at your own life and your own needs and wants. And I think we've been sold this: you have to have everything or else you're not successful. And I think I feel like there's a change or a move where people are starting to recognize, having a bunch of crappy stuff just makes you a dumpster.
Yeah.
Like you're pretty much paying to have them, process their trash and give it to you, and then all of a sudden it's in your house, instead of going for high quality stuff.
Right.
And things that are more interesting, like the hand statue behind you. Like, I've been looking at that a lot. Like, that's interesting. It draws attention and stuff. Like, that's value. I think it's Hindu statue that you've got in the background. Like, that's interesting. And maybe they're mass produced, maybe they're not. I don't know. But I just think that we need to wake up and recognize the power that we have and how we can influence the world just by our everyday actions.
Yeah, that's really cool. What's interesting about what you're, describing here is really interesting to me as well, because I think a lot of times, we hear like the gurus and like, the business gurus and things like that are constantly talking about, hey, we have control to pick and choose what we are consuming, what we're watching, what we're doing. And yes, while that is very true and very powerful, right? I mean, especially on the side of, hey, social media is a waste of time. Well, it is if you're using it wrong.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I mean, look at the world that we live in. We have access not only to support people, like you're saying, and I love that angle, right? To support people so easily just by simply, investing our time or engaging or, these different things. But also on the flip side of that, we have so much opportunity that is easily accessible to us to, seek out information, to learn more about different things. Like I mean, man, I hope I'm never in a situation that there's, not resources and education and technology available to me, because like, I feel like as entrepreneurs, like that's how we can thrive, right?
Yeah.
We can thrive because instead of, compared to, 50, 100 years ago, where it was like, well, I want to start this, but I'm going to have to walk down to the library and look up a book on how to file for a business license or how to, do these things. Well, no, you can actually do it in 5 minutes by just pulling up your phone.
Yep.
Right. So the technology, I don't know, it's just mind blowing to me to think about that and just think about how truly blessed we are to live in the time of world that we live in. Okay. So taking things back just a little bit, I want to spend a couple of minutes before we wrap up this conversation around something that's like totally switching gears, but it's interesting to me. So you mentioned at the beginning of your journey, beginning of starting, deciding that you wanted to start your own businesses, that you and your wife had a conversation around, hey, maybe she wants to, work, maybe she wants to do these different things. What did that look like for you? And I mean, in the relationship, I think, being an entrepreneur while also having someone who is, and I mean this in the best way, but kind of following a society, go to school, become a doctor. I mean, that's incredible. What an incredible accomplishment. But how has that dynamic been? And speak more specifically for those in the audience that are maybe at a part in their, in their journey, or, fork in the road, where they're like, hey, I really want to start something different, but I know it is way outside of what my spouse signed up for when we first were together. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. So I guess even maybe to some of the audience members that are that aren't married,
Mm-hmm.
what I would suggest is sometimes we get hung up with, well, especially as a guy, like, oh, she needs to be a 9 or a 10 or whatever. And when I was younger, it was like I was really stuck on, well, she's got to be a volleyball player, because I was really into volleyball. And I was like, she's got to do it because we're going to do it with our family and blah, blah, blah. And well, my wife's not a volleyball player, and she's not very athletic, but she's incredibly talented in many other ways, right?
Mm-hmm.
But what I would suggest is first try to find somebody that, if that's something you really want to do, try to find somebody that you're attracted to and that has that same mentality, and it'll help you out a lot. But when it came to our particular conversation, it wasn't really something that I even thought about previous, and it was something that so the way it kind of came forward is that she's like, I really love my job. I love what I do. It's very engaging, very fulfilling.
Mm-hmm.
And I want you to do that. So if you're not, I want you to have that same thing. So if you're not there, let's try to figure it out. And so the first step was, her supporting me in changing fields. I mean, going from engineering, into engineering industry into construction. Like, a lot of people look at that and they're like, oh, well, there's that even happened. Like it was a problem for me because it was kind of walking away from like the prestige of being an engineer or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And, going into construction, which people don't really recognize, which is right now is the biggest, best kept secret in the world. I mean, anyway, I could go on a tangent, but I'll stick to this topic. So we just kind of talked about that. And then when we were in home building, she was really good and kind of, touched base with me and talked to me. And me as a guy, I have to be willing to open up and share so that she understands where I'm at. But, she's just like, well, it doesn't seem like you're very happy with how things are panning out with that particular company. Like, what do you think about this? And especially while I was in the home building, I was like, man, some of these guys, and this is going to sound terrible, but some of these guys are stupid.
Yeah.
If they can run a business, I can run a business, And so that's, unfortunately, that arrogance was what kind of got me there, got me thinking about it. But, unfortunately, fortunately. But yeah, just continuing to have conversations about what that looks like. And we kind of shifted from that traditional trajectory, like you were saying, from, well, this is the design that we kind of had, but what are other designs? And so we're kind of trying to flesh out a design of, is there a possibility for us to make enough money, both working part-time, to be able to have more time with the kids and more things like, other things and kind of share different responsibilities and whatever. And that way we both have access to a wider variety of what life can offer. Right.
Yeah, that's cool.
And kind of figure out if that will work out. And maybe it won't work out. Maybe I won't like working part-time, or maybe she won't like working part-time. And, both want to be full-time, but just being flexible and like talking and saying like, this is kind of the basic template. Does that work for us? Is there a way to do it better? Like you said, there's so much resources and technology and things that we have at our disposal right now, that the ability to create the life you really want to live, I think, has probably never been easier, especially if you sit down and really look at what you want. Do you want a big, nice, fancy house? Do you want a car, a big, fancy car? If not, don't put your money there, and don't waste your time making money to get things that help you feel better about wasting your time at a job you hate.
Yeah.
Like, you know, but rather focus on things that you really enjoy. And so I think if it came down to it, that's probably the crux behind it. Is we're really trying to go through that process of finding what we want to enjoy. You
Mhm.
know, is that more time? Is that more stuff? Is that particular stuff? Is it traveling? My wife loves to travel, so we're working on trying to, budget in traveling stuff. And yeah, so
That's cool. Yeah, I like that. When you said, at the beginning of the conversation that the two of you had, where she said, I love this, my work is very fulfilling to me, and I want you to have that as well. That gave me goosebumps, because I feel like in healthy relationships, that's how it should be.
yeah.
Right. And it kind of goes back to, even when we're starting our businesses as entrepreneurs, how you said, it doesn't have to be perfect. It can be a template of 60, 70%, 80% planned out. And then you figure it out after that. You let it evolve, you let it pivot a bit to figure out what you truly want and what you truly want it to be, and create. And it kind of, I like how that kind of, goes along with what we've been talking about, because I think that that's so true. It's, really giving the space to not only allow yourself to explore, different interests, different pieces, different types of work, but also giving your partner that space to do the same thing for themselves as well. Because at the end of the day, if two people in a relationship are completely fulfilled in the work that they're doing, imagine how incredible of a relationship that is, right? And the additional things that you can do together. So,
well, and what that happiness and excitement is going to do for their kids, and how those kids are going to influence other kids. And, really, I think that we've kind of been sold that we have to fix the world. And, that's been the global marketing since I've been a kid,
yeah,
go out and fix the world, but nobody talks about fixing their community, right? And I think that having a little bit more of an individualistic, mindset, getting your life good so that you're happy, and then helping your family be happy, and then helping your community be happy, that's how you change the world. And it's honestly the way you change worlds. You change your world, you change your wife's world, you change your kids' world, you change your neighbor's world. But yeah, I think that, over history, we've kind of seen that women have asked for more freedom in what they want to do, right? So, the women's movement, everything feminism, which is great. I think that guys are still locked into the normal traditional stuff, and we haven't really thought about, what if I wanted to be a stay-at-home dad?
yeah,
What if I wanted to be, what if I want to do this? What if I want to do that? And I think we're getting into a position that if both partners are open to that, you could find something that truly makes you happy and most productive. And maybe that looks like, the dad staying home and doing stuff with his kids, and the mom working, and maybe they're both happy. I think trying to find that balance or that lifestyle is probably the most valuable thing that you could do, instead of just trying to, do the same thing that's making you unhappy, that makes you have to spend a bunch of money to go on vacation, and then need a vacation from the vacation. And
right.
So I don't know. Honestly, starting my business has probably been the most eye-opening, revelation, inspiration filled year and a half of my life, other than serving the people in Mexico. I mean, that's really, it's completely world changing perspective.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, that's cool. That's really cool. Yeah. And I guess to wrap up and to kind of feed off of what you're saying on this too, I mean, I think that is so true. And, you know, I can't speak from a male perspective because, you know, I'm not a guy, but
yeah.
but from a female perspective, you know, and also too, I mean, so I don't know, it's a very interesting world that we live in, because there are, you know, just roles that we are shattering and molds that we are shattering, right? Because we don't live in the same world that existed 50 years ago, 30 years ago, 20 years ago, even, right?
Yeah.
And so often, I mean, even in my own business, I have to remind myself, wait, am I thinking this is the right way because this is what I've always been taught? Or am I thinking this is the right way to do it because that's what I believe is the right way to do it? Right.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's a really, really, really great point. Awesome. Okay, Trevor, this has been such a fun conversation. And I feel like we got into some cool topics that were a little off, you know, off the typical, I don't know, normal entrepreneurial conversations. So
Yeah.
that was fun. Before we wrap up, please let our listeners know a little bit about your business, where they can find you, and how they can get in touch with you if they'd like to reach out.
Yeah. So my business is Forge, Build, and Design. You can find, I've got a Facebook page that's just Forge, Build, and Design. Instagram is Forge, Build, and Design. And YouTube, I've done some YouTube, but I was actually watching or listening to one of your other things, and I can't remember the lady's name, the interviewee's name, but she was talking about finding things that you can be more consistent at. And YouTube just took way too much energy for me, but I do have a YouTube. It's called Life Forge. I've got projects, businesses, and then just some random thoughts on there. And as time goes on, I'll probably continue to add that. But yeah, so when it comes to business stuff, currently I'm focusing on what's called CNC routing out of wood materials. And what you could think, or you know, I would suggest searching it, CNC router art or projects or whatever. It's really cool, very interesting, even if you just want to watch stuff. But there's so much capability to be creative and to do amazing things through that, that there's a lot of things that I want to do. 3D relief carving is something you could look up. Yeah, you can do furniture, you can do everything. So I'm specifically focusing right now trying to offer some accent wall pieces that you could put together, paint, and that way it's cheaper. Kind of the same idea of like if you were to go to those pottery, like the raw pottery stores, and then you can paint it to your family. So same thing, you take these home, and then you can paint it and do whatever you want, have fun, and have it be a creative idea for your kids and activities. So I'm just trying to think of things that, as you know, the economy gets a little bit more difficult, how can I help, you know, people beautify their homes, add value to their homes, but also make it an activity, you know,
Yeah, that's cool.
It's double value. But outside of that, I also do general contracting. I'm kind of in works with a couple of people to possibly do some small cabin getaways up in the mountains. And I just love building and designing and stuff. And so anything that you have that you're like, man, I would love to do this, but I don't know how, reach out, give me a call. I love to even just help people bounce ideas and stuff like that. And just expand that network and friends. And I try to do my best to find really good people to work with. And so if you need a furniture guy, I've got a custom furniture guy that's really great prices in Murray. If you need some amazing wood build-ins, I've got an amazing built-in carpenter that lives down the street for me, just does phenomenal work. If you need like super high-end, like one of my other buddies in Springville, he made this game table that had a TV put inside of it with LED lights. I mean, it was like Vegas level style. It was amazing. So if you need that, I've got that. I've got guys in the trades. I kind of want to be that guy where it's like, oh, I need blah. Oh, I've got that guy,
Yeah,
So
that's awesome.
feel free to reach out. Just be friends. If you have anything, I'd love to help you out.
Cool. Well, thank you so much, Trevor. This was an awesome episode.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity. I appreciate it. It was my first time, so it was really fun.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of the Marketing Mastermind podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please like, follow, rate our show, and share with your friends on social media. You can also join our community by visiting us online at marketingmastermindpodcast.com. Thanks for joining us, and we'll catch you on the next episode.